Hi, this is Mike Schmitz, and welcome to another edition of Screencasts Online. In this episode, we'll be revisiting Keyboard Maestro, a powerful Mac automation tool that recently received a major update. If you're not familiar with Keyboard Maestro, it's a Mac application that allows automation of routine functions such as navigating running applications, opening documents, typing text, expanding abbreviations, and controlling web applications by means of a visual programming language with support for variables, styled clipboards, functions, and text tokens. We cover Keyboard Maestro in depth in episodes 457 and 459. Updates to version 7 in episode 522, and most recently it was included in the Mac automation videos episodes 597 and 607. If you want an in-depth tutorial on how Keyboard Maestro works, definitely check out those episodes, as in this episode, we're going to dive into what's new in version 8. And there's a lot. Stairway Software, the developer of Keyboard Maestro, has a complete list of what's new on their website at keyboardmaestro.com. We'll be demonstrating several of the new features to show you how you might want to incorporate these new features to automate your Mac. We'll also give you a couple examples of Keyboard Maestro macros that can be used in conjunction with other Mac utilities to take your Mac automation to the next level.